They try to make you feel small with their silence, their sarcasm, their looks. But here's the truth, you only shrink when you forget who you are. And today you remember. Have you ever walked into a room and felt it, like someone is quietly trying to make you shrink? Maybe they don't say it outright, but the energy is clear. A glance, a fake smile, a comment dressed as a joke. You start questioning your worth without even realizing it. They don't need to shout. All they need is for you to start doubting yourself. And what's terrifying is, sometimes, you do. But here's what they don't know, the moment you stop reacting, the moment you stop chasing their approval, that's when you take back all the power they never really had over you. Imagine a shadow. It looks big. It stretches across the floor like it owns the space. But what gives that shadow its shape? Light. Remove the light, and the shadow disappears. That's exactly how people who belittle you operate. Their power comes from the attention you give them, from the emotional light you shine their way. Turn that light off, refuse to react, and suddenly, they lose form. They lose shape. They lose power. Or think of a venomous snake. It's not dangerous because of its size. It's dangerous because of the fear it creates. But when you stop fearing it, when you see it for what it really is, it becomes just another creature. Not a monster. The moment you stop reacting with fear, the poison loses its effect. Those who try to make you feel small don't need you to actually fail, they just need you to believe you're not good enough. Their entire strategy is built on your self-doubt. But the moment you stop shrinking, the moment you choose to stand tall, even in silence, they realize something powerful: they were never as strong as they thought. Because while they were trying to control how you see yourself, you had the ultimate power all along, the power to choose how you respond. And when you choose not to engage, not to stoop, not to explain or defend, that's when everything shifts. They feel it. The power dynamic changes. You've reclaimed your ground without saying a word. So how do you deal with these people, the ones who subtly, or not so subtly, try to make you feel invisible, insignificant, or small? How do you stay grounded? Without arguing? How do you keep your strength? Without proving yourself? How do you rise? Without lowering yourself to their level? Stay with me until the end, because the last one will change the way you show up in every room you enter. Let's begin. Number 1, recognize their insecurity. Let's talk about something we've all faced: someone trying to shrink you. It might show up as a sarcastic jab disguised as humor. Maybe it's an eye roll when you speak, a passive-aggressive comment that leaves a mark, or just a tone in their voice that quietly says, "You're not enough." But here's the truth, that behavior says nothing about you. It says everything about them. Their comments are not rooted in your shortcomings, they're rooted in their own insecurity. The louder someone tries to belittle others, the more desperate they are to hide their own fear of inadequacy. People who feel whole, who feel secure, don't need to push others down. They don't need to outshine anyone. They're not threatened by your presence, your growth, or your strength. But insecure people are. Your quiet confidence is threatening to someone who hasn't built their own, and that's why you must learn to see through the act. Behind the sarcasm is fear. Behind the cold shoulder is uncertainty. Behind the dismissiveness is someone who hasn't done the work on themselves. And that's your first step. Don't take it personally. Don't take their insecurity as your identity. You don't need to react. You don't need to explain. You don't need to prove your worth, because real power is quiet. And when you don't flinch, when you don't feed their game, they begin to realize, you were never someone they could control. Picking up from where we left off, understanding that people who try to belittle you often do so from a place of insecurity, we now turn to the subtle ways their actions can influence even the strongest minds. At first, James couldn't help but question himself. Was he not as capable as he thought? Were his ideas really not good enough? That quiet doubt began to whisper louder each day. But then, something shifted. James paused, stepped back, and observed not just his colleague, but the patterns. He realized this wasn't about him at all. It was about a man who couldn't stand to see others shine because he feared his own light wasn't bright enough. Once James recognized this, everything changed. He stopped reacting. He stopped defending. He let go of the need for validation from someone who never had the power to define him in the first place. Instead, he focused on what mattered, his work, his growth, and his inner peace. And guess what? The more composed James became, the more his colleagues' comments lost their sting. Eventually, others in the office began to see the truth too. The belittling stood out like noise in a quiet room, unnecessary, disruptive, and rooted in personal insecurity. Because the instant you respond with emotion, they win. This is the essence of Stoic strength. You don't silence the critics by shouting louder. You silence them by refusing to echo their noise. So next time someone tries to chip away at your confidence, ask yourself, is this truly about me? Or about their need to feel taller by making someone else smaller? The moment you ask that, you reclaim your power. And now that you see through the mask of insecurity, let's talk about the next critical step, how to guard your energy and set unshakable boundaries. Because knowing their motive is only the beginning. Knowing how to protect yourself from it, that's where the real power begins. Let's move to number 2. Number 2, stay unshaken by their words. This is one of the most powerful inner skills a person can develop. And let's be honest, we've all been there. Maybe it was a snide comment tossed your way during a meeting, an unnecessary jab in a group conversation, or even a friendly critique masked as advice. And in that moment, your instincts kick in. Say something back. Defend yourself. Prove them wrong. But here's the real question, what does reacting actually give you? When you defend yourself to someone who's trying to tear you down, you feed their power. You validate the very game they're playing. The truth is, you are not defined by their opinion. Their words only carry weight if you allow them into your mind. Think of it like this, someone throws a stone at a fortress. If the walls are strong, the stone falls to the ground. No damage. No cracks. Just silence. You are that fortress, when you choose to be. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, choose not to be harmed, and you won't be. That's not ignorance. That's control. That's composure. So the next time someone hurls criticism your way, do what James did. Pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this person even speaking from truth, or from insecurity, jealousy, or projection? You'll often find their words say more about their inner world than about yours. Let me share a small story. A woman I know, let's call her Maya, once gave a heartfelt presentation at work. Right after, a colleague leaned in and said, interesting points, but I expected something a little more polished. In the past, Maya would have lost sleep over that comment. But that day, she smiled and replied, thanks for the feedback. Then walked away. She didn't explain. She didn't defend. She didn't flinch. And guess what? Her silence echoed louder than any argument ever could. Because staying calm, grounded, and unbothered, that is a power people don't expect. And when they can't shake you, they lose interest in trying. So remember, you don't need to match their energy. You don't need to carry every insult. And you certainly don't need to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. The question is, what do you want to carry, someone else's words, or your own peace? Now that you've learned how to stay unshaken, let's move forward. Because there's something even more powerful than silence, and it's knowing when to set boundaries that protect your peace. Let's talk about that in number 3. Let's be clear, when someone insults you, criticizes you, or tries to diminish your worth, they're not just making a statement, they're baiting you. What they truly want is your reaction. That flicker of anger in your eyes. That defensive comment. That moment of doubt they can plant in your mind. The moment you begin to question your value based on their words, you hand them the reins to your peace of mind. But when you remain calm, when you don't flinch, Don't lash out. Don't allow their words to shake you, you take back that control. You send a powerful message, you do not get to decide who I am. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your armor. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Think about that. It's not what they say that truly affects you, it's the meaning you assign to it. If you perceive their comments as trivial, they become powerless. If you see their criticism for what it is, background noise, projection, insecurity, it fades into irrelevance. Their opinion does not shape your truth. You do. Let me tell you about a man I know, let's call him David. He worked with someone who always seemed to have something negative to say. No matter how well David performed, this colleague would find a way to throw shade. When David was praised, the colleague would mutter, let's see if he can keep it up. When David contributed in meetings, the response was always some form of, interesting, but not good enough. At first, David was deeply frustrated. He'd go home replaying the comments in his head, wondering if there was some truth in them. But then he asked himself the question that changed everything, why am I giving this person so much power over my peace? That's when David shifted. Instead of defending himself, he chose stillness. When a sarcastic comment came, he smiled and moved forward. When criticized unfairly, he let his results speak louder than any comeback. And something remarkable happened. The negativity lost its sting. That colleague eventually gave up, because there was nothing to feed on. Why? Because you can't manipulate someone who refuses to be manipulated. So what should you do the next time someone tries to make you feel small? Recognize what's really happening. Their words are rooted in insecurity, not in truth. Don't take the bait, stay grounded, calm, and detached from their drama. Keep rising, let your growth, your actions, and your resilience answer louder than any insult ever could. Because at the end of the day, you're not here to match their energy. You're here to master your own. As we've seen, staying composed and not reacting is already powerful, but there's a level even deeper. One that completely disarms negativity at its root, indifference. Let's dive into one of the most effective, underrated strategies for dealing with people who try to belittle you, responding with pure, grounded indifference. Now you might ask, why indifference? What's so powerful about seeming like you don't care? Because when someone tries to make you feel small, whether it's a passive-aggressive comment, a mocking joke, or a backhanded compliment, they're doing it for one reason: they want a reaction. They want you to feel something. Anger, shame, doubt. Because your emotional reaction gives them exactly what they want, power over your peace. But here's the truth, nothing takes the wind out of their sails faster than your complete lack of concern. When you remain unfazed, when you respond with calm detachment, like their words barely register, you shift the entire dynamic. Suddenly, they're no longer in control of the conversation. They're no longer steering your emotions. You are. That's why indifference isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's emotional jujitsu. You let their words pass by without resistance, without giving them weight, and without offering any energy in return. Let me paint you a picture. There was a young woman I met, let's call her Natalie. She worked in a competitive office where one colleague constantly made subtle digs at her. Comments like, "Must be nice to get by on charm," or, "Don't worry. Not everyone needs to be detail-oriented." Others might have snapped back or tried to prove themselves. But Natalie did something different. She responded with a neutral expression, a calm nod, or sometimes no response at all. She never defended, never engaged, never rewarded the bait. And what happened? Over time, that colleague grew frustrated, confused, and eventually silent. Why? Because Natalie gave them nothing to feed on. Her silence was louder than any argument. Her indifference was her armor. So how can you use this powerful tool? Detach emotionally. When someone throws shade, pause. Let the moment pass. Don't internalize it. Don't react. See the bigger picture, their comment? It's noise. Your response? That's your power. Stay focused on your values and your direction. Reframe their attempt. If someone's trying to shake you, it means you're standing for something. And that's worth protecting. Remember this, indifference doesn't mean apathy. It means strength. It means choosing not to let small people dictate your state of mind. Let them mock. Let them try. Let them reveal more about themselves than they ever could about you. And when you walk away without a scratch, they'll finally understand, you are not here to play their game. You've already won by refusing to show up to it. And if indifference is your armor, then silence is your weapon. Because nothing unsettles an insecure person more than being completely ignored. This is where Stoic wisdom steps in once again. Seneca once wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings. And the more life tests you, the more you begin to understand, not everything deserves your attention." You see, when you've grown strong enough, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you realize something crucial: not every insult requires a comeback. Not every challenge deserves a duel. Sometimes the greatest display of strength is to say nothing at all. Why? Because silence isn't weakness. Silence is mastery. Let me tell you a story. There's a man I know, we'll call him Alex. Smart, disciplined, focused. But at his workplace, there was someone who constantly tried to chip away at his confidence. This co-worker would make sarcastic comments during team meetings, roll their eyes when Alex spoke, and nitpick his every contribution. Every interaction was an attempt to undermine him, subtly, consistently. At first, like many of us would, Alex wanted to fight back. He wanted to defend his work, confront the disrespect, and make it clear that he wouldn't tolerate it. But then, he made a decision that changed everything. Instead of arguing, he chose to withdraw his energy completely. He stopped giving reactions. When the co-worker made a rude remark, Alex didn't even blink. When they rolled their eyes, he stayed focused on the project. When they tried to spark conflict, he stayed silent, unbothered, present, but detached. And here's what happened: the power shifted. Without fuel for their fire, the co-workers' efforts began to fall flat. Their sarcasm lost its sting. Their eye rolls became invisible. Their frustration grew, not because they were being attacked, but because they were being ignored. And eventually, something powerful happened: they stopped altogether. Why? Because the game wasn't fun anymore. There was no reaction to feed off. No emotional reward. Alex won, not through words, not through retaliation, but through presence without participation. So how do you apply this in your own life? First, remind yourself, their words only have meaning if you give them meaning. Their opinions, no matter how loud, don't define who you are. Your worth isn't up for debate. Second, resist the urge to explain, defend, or retaliate. Let your silence be the boundary. Let your stillness be the lesson. The more you respond, the more you invite chaos. The more you stay quiet, the more you protect your peace. Finally, walk away mentally. That doesn't mean physically leaving the room, it means emotionally detaching. Stop carrying their energy in your head. You're not obligated to absorb their projections. Because here's the truth: freedom begins where your concern for their opinion ends. When you stop reacting, stop engaging, stop needing to be understood by those who will never see your value, you set your own. And when you no longer react, when their words can no longer shake you, something powerful happens: you free yourself entirely from their influence. At the end of the day, you don't have to fight every battle, especially not the ones that aren't worth your energy. Let them talk. Let them try. Let them waste their time hurling words into silence. Because while they throw shadows, you move in light. Your indifference is your strength. And no one, not their sarcasm, not their pettiness, not their insecurity, can take that from you. Number 4, let your actions speak louder than anything else. Now let's talk about one of the most effective, most undeniable ways to respond to people who try to make you feel small. Prove them wrong without saying a single word. Because here's the truth, when someone doubts you, belittles you, or tries to pull you down, your first instinct might be to speak up, to argue back, to explain why they're wrong. But think about this, do words ever really change minds? Not often. Actions do. And that's where your real power is, not in talking about who you are, but in showing it. Let's be real. People who belittle others don't actually want the truth. They're not seeking clarity. They want to plant doubt. They want to throw you off balance. They want to see you question yourself, hesitate, second guess, maybe even give up. They feed on reaction. But the moment you stop giving them that reaction and redirect your focus inward, on your goals, your path, your growth, you take away the one thing they crave most, influence. Every achievement you earn, every small win, every quiet step forward is a blow to their illusion of control. Success silences critics far more effectively than words ever will. This is where Stoic wisdom offers clarity once again. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." In other words, don't tell them what you believe. Be it. Don't argue about your worth. Demonstrate it. Don't waste time proving. Just keep producing. Let your results be the loudest thing in the room. Let your work speak for you in ways no defense ever could. Because people can argue with opinions, but they can't argue with outcomes. Let me share a story. There's a man I know, let's call him Daniel. For years, Daniel worked in an environment where he was constantly belittled, subtly, but persistently. A few co-workers would mock his ideas, dismiss his ambition, even downplay his wins. Every time he brought something to the table, someone had a way to twist it, minimize it, or throw shade. At first, Daniel tried to explain himself. He'd clarify, defend. Sometimes he'd even doubt himself, wondering, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not good enough. But one day, he stopped. Not because he gave up, but because he realized the truth. He didn't need their validation. He needed progress. So he went quiet. Not passive, focused. He doubled down on his work. Took extra time to refine his ideas. Practiced relentless consistency. And within a year, not only did his performance speak volumes, but he was offered a leadership role that left the very people who mocked him speechless. He didn't win by arguing. He won by rising, by doing. So, what can we learn from Daniel? Don't waste energy defending yourself to those who want to see you doubt. Their validation isn't the goal, your vision is. Redirect your power toward results. Let every step forward, every completed project, every sign of progress be your response. Remember what Epictetus taught us, you don't need to explain. You need to embody. Actions will always carry more weight than explanations. Yourself free, and sometimes, the greatest victories are won in silence. When the noise fades, and all that's left standing are the results, yours. Let me tell you about Daniel. A man constantly underestimated. People around him told him he wasn't capable, that he didn't have what it takes. They laughed at his ambition, actually laughed. They dismissed his ideas, rolled their eyes at his vision, and tried to make him feel like he didn't belong, like he was dreaming too big, reaching too far. And at first, it got to him. He was tempted to fight back, to defend himself, to argue, to explain, to prove, with words, that he was more than they gave him credit for. But Daniel made a different decision, a quieter one, a more powerful one. He decided to stop talking, and start doing. No more defending. No more seeking approval. He would let his results speak louder than anything he could ever say. So he worked, in silence. Early mornings, late nights, focused effort, steady growth. While they mocked, he learned. While they gossiped, he refined. While they laughed, he leveled up. And over time, something remarkable happened. His success silenced every single critic. The same people who once scoffed at him, suddenly, they weren't laughing anymore. They were curious, confused, even envious. Because here's the truth: success doesn't need a microphone. It echoes louder than any insult, sharper than any sarcastic remark, and stronger than any judgment ever thrown your way. So, how do you handle people who try to belittle you? First, stop explaining yourself. You do not owe anyone a justification for who you are, what you dream, or what you're capable of becoming. The moment you stop seeking approval is the moment you start stepping into your true power. Second, put every ounce of energy into your growth. Let them waste their breath. Let them use their time trying to tear others down. While they talk, you build. While they doubt, you develop. Third, trust that success speaks louder than words ever will. You don't need to argue your worth. You don't need to prove anything to them. Just rise higher than they ever expected. Let your life become the rebuttal they never saw coming. At the end of the day, you don't need to win the debate. You just need to win your own battle. Not with noise, but with progress. Not with ego, but with excellence. Sometimes the strongest message isn't spoken, it's felt through the silence of success. And now, let's talk about the invisible shield that keeps your peace intact: setting firm boundaries. Number 5. Set firm boundaries. Let's talk about one of the most essential forms of self-respect, and one of the most powerful ways to protect your peace: boundaries. When someone repeatedly belittles you, undermines you, or tries to chip away at your confidence, you have two choices. You can tolerate it, hoping they'll change, or you can draw the line. You can protect your space. You can say, "This is where it stops." Here's the hard truth, one most people avoid facing: if you don't set the boundary, they will keep testing your limits. Why? Because some people thrive on control. They thrive on making others feel small because it gives them a twisted sense of power. And if you say nothing, if you let their words slide, they take that as permission. They'll ignore your discomfort. They'll step over your values. And they'll keep pushing until you either collapse, or finally stand up. But the moment you draw the line, clearly, calmly, without apology, something powerful shifts. You stop playing their game. You stop being an easy target. You stop being available for disrespect. That's the moment you take back control, not just of the situation, but of your self-worth. This is exactly what Stoic wisdom teaches us. Epictetus said, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." If you're constantly chasing validation from someone who disrespects you, you're giving them your power. You're letting them write the script for how you feel. But when you set boundaries, real ones, you stop waiting for their approval. You stop needing them to treat you better. You simply walk away when they don't. Because here's the reality: self-respect means not staying where you are not respected. Let me share a quick story. A woman I once worked with, let's call her Rachel, had a manager who constantly spoke down to her in meetings. Dismissive, cold, condescending. At first, Rachel tried harder to earn his respect. She worked overtime. She over-explained. She apologized even when she wasn't wrong. But nothing changed. In fact, the worse she felt, the bolder he got. Then one day, she changed everything, not by yelling, not by begging, but by calmly saying, "This is not how I expect to be spoken to. If it happens again, I'll escalate it to HR." No drama, no emotion, just a line. And you know what happened? He never crossed it again. So, how do you do this in your own life? First, pay attention to how people make you feel, consistently. If someone leaves you drained, anxious, or doubting yourself over and over again, that's not a connection. That's a boundary waiting to happen. Second, decide what your non-negotiables are. What will you no longer tolerate? What do you need in order to feel safe and respected? Third, communicate it with calm firmness. You don't need to explain yourself endlessly. You just need to be clear. Remember, a person who respects themselves is not afraid to walk away. And that brings us to the next step in reclaiming your power. Because once you've drawn your boundaries, there's one more skill you need to master: the art of owning your space without apology. When you protect your peace, you protect your power. And the strongest form of protection? Setting firm, unapologetic boundaries, even with people you once cared deeply about. Number 6, set firm boundaries, and keep them. If you keep tolerating toxic behavior just to avoid conflict, you are sacrificing your peace on the altar of someone else's comfort. And slowly, day by day, you start to disappear. But the moment you set the line, the moment you say, "This is no longer acceptable," you begin to reclaim something sacred, your power. Let me share a true story. There's a woman I know, we'll call her Sarah. Every time Sarah shared a personal win, a promotion, a new goal, even a moment of excitement, one of her oldest friends would immediately cut her down. With a smile, they'd say things like, "Oh, that's cute," or, "I mean, that's impressive. For you, I guess." It felt like a joke, but it stung every single time. For months, Sarah tried to ignore it. She told herself she was being too sensitive. She even laughed along, pretending it didn't hurt. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. She started realizing this wasn't friendship. This was someone who found joy in making her feel small. One day, she made a decision. She stopped replying to the backhanded compliments. She stopped justifying her dreams. She stopped showing up for conversations that left her drained. Most importantly, she created space, distance, from the negativity. And just like that, the weight lifted. There were no big arguments, no dramatic fallout, just peace. She no longer had to prove herself to someone who was never going to respect her in the first place. So how do you do the same? First, understand this: you don't owe anyone access to your energy. Just because someone's been in your life for years, doesn't mean they've earned the right to stay. Longevity is not a license for disrespect. Second, stop explaining yourself to people who don't even listen. A boundary is not a debate. It's not a performance. It's a quiet line drawn from self-respect. Third, walk away when necessary. Distance is power. You don't have to slam the door. Sometimes, just not opening it again is enough, because at the end of the day, you teach people how to treat you by what you allow. If someone repeatedly makes you feel less than, if their words are tiny knives wrapped in sarcasm, if their presence leaves you doubting your worth, then the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Because the more you protect your peace, the stronger your presence becomes. The more you honor your self-worth, the less room you have for anyone who threatens it. And that leads us to the next powerful shift, one that few ever master. But once you do, it changes everything. Number 7, don't try to win, walk away with your power intact. Number 6, turn their negativity into fuel. Let's talk about one of the most powerful mindset shifts you'll ever make, the ability to take someone's criticism and convert it into pure drive. You see, when someone belittles you, mocks you, or underestimates your worth, you have two options: let it discourage you, or let it drive you. Weak minds crumble under negativity. Strong minds, they alchemize it. They take every insult, every cold stare, every passive-aggressive remark, and turn it into fuel that ignites progress. Here's the truth: the best way to silence someone who doubts you is not with words, not with arguments, not with explanations. It's with results. Because here's what most people don't realize: the ones trying to bring you down, they're often mirrors of their own failures. They doubt you because they gave up on themselves. They want to see you fail because success would force them to face their own inaction. It's not about you. It's about them. But when you don't break, when you rise, work harder, and stay focused, you become undeniable. Let me share a quick story. A young entrepreneur I know, we'll call him Jordan, was told again and again that he wasn't cut out for the business world. Family, friends, even his old mentor, they told him to play it safe. Don't aim too high, you'll fail. You're not the type. But instead of fighting back with words, Jordan got quiet, focused, ruthless, with his goals. Every time he heard, "You can't," he heard, "Prove me wrong." He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He built. And years later, The same people who dismissed him were asking for his advice. That's the power of turning negativity into fuel. So how do you do it? First, reframe every criticism. Don't see it as a reason to stop. See it as a challenge to rise. Second, channel your energy inward. Don't waste time on debates. Invest it in discipline. Let their doubt sharpen your focus like a blade on stone. Third, keep your eye on the mission. Let every step forward, every win, every moment of quiet growth, be the loudest answer they never saw coming. Because when you use negativity as fuel, you're no longer reacting. You're building, you're growing, you're becoming. At the end of the day, success doesn't need an argument, it needs a result. And when you rise higher than they ever imagined, you don't just win, you redefine the entire game. And that leads us straight into the next shift, one that will elevate your confidence even further. Number 7, don't try to win the game, change the rules entirely. This is where Stoic wisdom shines through like a lighthouse in the storm. Seneca once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor strengthens the body." In other words, the very challenges designed to break you can become the workouts that build you. Just like lifting weight steers muscle before it grows stronger, adversity tests your spirit before it sharpens your edge. Every insult, every doubt, every sarcastic remark, it's mental resistance training. And the more you face it, the more unshakable you become. The people who say you can't, they're giving you material. Every no becomes a step toward your yes. Every put down becomes a push-up for your mindset. Let me tell you a story. A man I know, let's call him Jake, was no stranger to criticism. When he first told his family he wanted to start a business, they laughed. "You? Run a business? Good luck with that." When he shared his goals with friends, the response was the same. "Come on, man. Be realistic." At first, those words stung. But Jake made a decision, a quiet, firm, in a vow. He wasn't going to argue. He wasn't going to convince anyone. He was going to build. So he took every piece of doubt and fed it into the fire. The more they laughed, the more focused he became. The more they doubted, the more he disciplined himself. Until one day, the same people who mocked him were suddenly asking for advice. That's how the game changes. So how do you do it? How do you turn negativity into fuel? First, stop taking it personally. Their doubt is about their fear, their limitation, not your potential. Their judgment doesn't define you unless you let it. Second, reframe every insult. Every time someone says, "You'll never make it," think, "Thanks for the extra energy. I'll use it wisely." Turn mockery into motivation. Turn resistance into repetition. Use their words to strengthen your resolve. Third, focus on results, not revenge. Don't waste time trying to make them believe in you. Let your accomplishments speak on your behalf. Because success doesn't need validation. It doesn't need applause. It just is. And here's the part most people miss. Negativity only holds the power you choose to give it. When someone tries to bring you down, don't meet them there. Don't argue. Don't explain. Use their words as steps, and climb higher. Because while they're busy talking, you'll be busy rising. And that brings us to the next powerful shift. Don't just respond to criticism, redefine the game itself. Number 7, surround yourself with those who uplift you. Let their doubt be your fire. And when you rise higher than they ever imagined, do it without a single word. Now, let's talk about something even more critical, your environment. Because no matter how strong your mind is, if you surround yourself with the wrong people, that strength will be tested in all the wrong ways. You see, one of the most powerful decisions you'll ever make in your life is who you allow close. Because the people around you, they either breathe belief into your dreams, or they quietly suffocate them with subtle jabs, backhanded compliments, or persistent doubt. Here's the truth: the right people, those truly aligned with your purpose, will recognize your value without needing to make you feel small. They won't compete with your light. They'll help you shine brighter. But if you're constantly explaining yourself, if you find yourself shrinking, doubting, hesitating because of someone else's negativity, It's not your job to convince them of your worth. It's your job to walk away and protect your space. Let me say it plainly. Your circle is either your prison or your power. If you spend your time with those who uplift you, those who speak life into your goals, who support your growth, you will naturally elevate. Because positivity is contagious. Confidence is contagious. And so is doubt. Stay around the wrong voices too long, and that quiet criticism will start to echo inside your head. Even if you think you're strong enough to ignore it, over time, it wears on you. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes a compass. Seneca once said, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." He didn't say tolerate everyone. He didn't say stay out of guilt. He said, choose wisely. Spend time with people who challenge you to be better, not belittle your efforts. Celebrate your wins, not compete with them. Remind you of your worth, especially when you forget it. Let me share a real story. There's a woman I know, let's call her Emily. For years, she surrounded herself with people she thought were friends. But every time she shared her dreams, big or small, they'd reply with, "Are you sure you can handle that? That seems risky. Maybe play it safe." No one directly insulted her, but their skepticism was constant. Quiet enough to avoid confrontation, but loud enough to plant doubt. And it worked. For years, Emily held back, not because she lacked talent, but because she was surrounded by limitation. Then something changed. She made a decision to change her environment. She started connecting with people who saw her potential, who didn't just nod, they encouraged, challenged, and inspired her to aim higher. When she spoke of her goals, they didn't say, "Are you sure?" They said, "Let's go. What's the next step?" And over time, everything shifted. Her confidence, her pace, her results. She didn't need to prove herself anymore. She was finally in a space where her growth was expected, not questioned. So ask yourself, are the people around you sharpening you, or slowly dulling your spirit? Here's how you start reclaiming your power. First, be honest about how people make you feel. If someone constantly drains you or makes you doubt yourself, they don't belong in your circle. Second, understand that time spent together doesn't equal loyalty earned. Just because they've been in your life for years doesn't mean they deserve to stay. Third, surround yourself with energy that aligns with your mission. People who fuel your fire, not fan your fear. Because in the end, you don't rise alone. Your environment either nurtures your greatness or neutralizes it. And if you truly want to become unshakable, you must first make sure you're not standing on sinking ground. Up next, let's talk about how to protect your peace with bold boundaries. Because even a strong mind needs clear limits. Let's continue. Number 8, set firm boundaries. Sometimes, instead of trying to fight back against hurtful words, what you need is simply to remember, who I remember your own worth. Let's talk about a truth so powerful it can shift the way you move through the world. No one can make you feel small, unless you give them permission to. We've all faced moments where someone's words tried to cut deep, subtle insults, passive-aggressive remarks, or outright dismissal. It stings. But here's the part many forget, the sting only lasts if you hold on to it. The way people treat you, that says more about them, their insecurities, their mindset, their fears. But how you respond, that reveals your strength, your clarity, and your self-respect. Someone can call you unworthy, but does that make it true? Of course not. Someone can doubt your abilities, does that erase your skill set, your effort, your growth? Absolutely not. Their voice doesn't define your value unless you start echoing it in your own head. And that's where the real danger lies, not in the insult, but in your internal agreement with it. The only way someone else's words have power is when you let them take root. Like seeds, their insults won't grow unless you water them with attention and belief. So the moment you stop feeding their words, they wither. Let me share something real. A woman I know, let's call her Maya, spent years in a relationship where her partner constantly made her feel less than. Any success she had was minimized. Any dream she shared was called unrealistic. For a long time, She internalized that narrative. She started shrinking. But one day, she asked herself, what if he's wrong? And that one question was the spark. She began to rebuild her confidence, not by yelling back, but by remembering her worth. She left that relationship. She pursued her dream. And today, she's thriving, because she stopped letting someone else's voice overwrite her own. So how do you reclaim your worth? First, recognize this: your value isn't up for debate. It's not a vote. It's a truth. Second, stop giving weight to opinions that haven't earned your respect. And finally, speak to yourself with the same respect you expect from others. When you build unshakable self-respect, the noise outside doesn't reach the core. Because you're no longer waiting for someone else to validate what you've already decided: you are enough. And when that sense of worth is solid, when it lives in your bones, there's one more shift that happens: you stop chasing validation and start choosing peace. So let's talk about how to own that peace fully. In the final lesson, and that starts with realizing your true worth. Remember your own worth. Let's talk about a truth so powerful it can shift the way you move through the world: no one can make you feel small, unless you give them permission to. We've all faced moments where someone's words tried to cut deep: subtle insults, passive-aggressive remarks, or outright dismissal. It stings. But here's the part many forget: the sting only lasts if you hold on to it. The way people treat you, that says more about them, their insecurities, their mindset, their fears. But how you respond, that reveals your strength, your clarity, and your self-respect. Someone can call you unworthy. But does that make it true? Of course not. Someone can doubt your abilities. Does that erase your skill set, your effort, your growth? Absolutely not. Their voice doesn't define your value unless you start echoing it in your own head. And that's where the real danger lies, not in the insult, but in your internal agreement with it. The only way someone else's words have power is when you let them take root. Like seeds, their insults won't grow unless you water them with attention and belief. So the moment you stop feeding their words, they wither. Let me share something real. A woman I know, let's call her Maya, spent years in a relationship where her partner constantly made her feel less than. Any success she had was minimized. Any dream she shared was called unrealistic. For a long time, she internalized that narrative. She started shrinking. But one day, she asked herself, what if he's wrong? And that one question was the spark. She began to rebuild her confidence, not by yelling back, but by remembering her worth. She left that relationship. She pursued her dream. And today, she's thriving, because she stopped letting someone else's voice overwrite her own. So how do you reclaim your worth? First, recognize this: your value isn't up for debate. It's not a vote. It's a truth. Second, stop giving weight to opinions that haven't earned your respect. And finally, speak to yourself with the same respect you expect from others. When you build unshakable self-respect, the noise outside doesn't reach the core. Because you're no longer waiting for someone else to validate what you've already decided: you are enough. And when that sense of worth is solid, when it lives in your bones, there's one more shift that happens: you stop chasing validation and start choosing peace. So let's talk about how to own that peace fully. In the final lesson, and once you've reclaimed your worth, fully, quietly, unapologetically, the next step is to protect it. Not with noise, not with force, but with how you show up. Day after day. Action builds confidence. Never shrink for anyone. Confidence is not something you're born with, it's something you build. Brick by brick. Step by step. Action by action. It doesn't come from applause. It doesn't come from compliments. And it certainly doesn't come from people who try to make you feel small. Confidence comes from something deeper. It comes from showing up for yourself. Especially on the days when no one else believes in you. Especially when the voice in your head says, you're not ready. You still show up. You still act. you still take that one next step forward. Because every time you do that, every time you push through the doubt, through the noise, through the fear, you earn a little more trust in yourself. And that trust becomes unshakable. This is the root of real confidence. It's not loud. It's not showy. It's calm, earned, and felt. But here's what you need to know: if someone tries to make you feel small, it often says more about them than it does about you. Why? Because people don't try to shrink those they think are weak. They try to shrink those who remind them of what they gave up on. They see something in you, a strength, a spark, a potential, and it intimidates them. So, instead of rising, they try to pull you down. That's not your burden to carry. So what do? You refuse to shrink. You don't make yourself smaller to make others comfortable. You don't quiet your voice just to avoid rocking the boat. You don't dull your ambition because someone else is afraid to chase theirs. You stand tall, not with arrogance, but with clarity, with calm power, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what they bring to the table. Because here's the truth: your worth is not up for negotiation. You don't need anyone to confirm it. You don't need their permission to rise. And you certainly don't need their approval to keep going. The moment you stop seeking validation is the moment you become untouchable. And the people who once tried to make you feel small, they lose their grip, their influence, their power. So remember this: take action. Even when you're unsure, show up. Even when it's uncomfortable, refuse to shrink. Even when they want you to. Because when you fully own your worth, when it lives in your bones and not in someone else's opinion, nothing they say can make you small again. And once you've reclaimed your worth, fully, quietly, unapologetically, the next step is to protect it. Not with noise, not with force, but with how you show up. Day after day. Action builds confidence. Never shrink for anyone. Confidence is not something you're born with, it's something you build. Brick by brick. Step by step. Action by action. It doesn't come from applause. It doesn't come from compliments. And it certainly doesn't come from people who try to make you feel small. Confidence comes from something deeper. It comes from showing up for yourself. Especially on the days when no one else believes in you. Especially when the voice in your head says, "You're not ready." You still show up. You still act. You still take that one next step forward. Because every time you do that, every time you push through the doubt, through the noise, through the fear, you earn a little more trust in yourself. And that trust becomes unshakable. This is the root of real confidence. It's not loud. It's not showy. It's calm, earned, and felt. But here's what you need to know: if someone tries to make you feel small, it often says more about them than it does about you. Why? Because people don't try to shrink those they think are weak. They try to shrink those who remind them of what they gave up on. They see something in you, a strength, a spark, a potential, and it intimidates them. So, instead of rising, they try to pull you down. That's not your burden to carry. So what do? You refuse to shrink. You don't make yourself smaller to make others comfortable. You don't quiet your voice just to avoid rocking the boat. You don't dull your ambition because someone else is afraid to chase theirs. You stand tall, not with arrogance, but with clarity, with calm power, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what they bring to the table. Because here's the truth: your worth is not up for negotiation. You don't need anyone to confirm it. You don't need their permission to rise. And you certainly don't need their approval to keep going. The moment you stop seeking validation is the moment you become untouchable. And the people who once tried to make you feel small, they lose their grip, their influence, their power. So remember this: take action. Even when you're unsure, show up. Even when it's uncomfortable, refuse to shrink. Even when they want you to. Because when you fully own your worth, when it lives in your bones and not in someone else's opinion, Nothing they say can make you small again, so the next time they look down on you, smile. Not out of arrogance, but out of knowing. Knowing that no one, no voice, no glare defines who you are. Because when you hold your peace, when you stand tall without needing applause, you become untouchable. You become unbreakable. You become everything they're afraid of. Calm. Grounded. Whole. Let them whisper, let them underestimate you. You don't need revenge. You don't need recognition. You just need this, the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth, and never trades it for approval. That's not pride. That's Stoic strength. And once you have it,